The first message came while I was rinsing a coffee mug. My relative had written something about the family version of events, and I honestly thought I had missed a joke. I read it twice, put my phone down, then picked it back up because the wording was just weird enough to stay in my head. By lunch, people in the family circle had turned it into this little funny thing I was supposed to be relaxed about. I laughed once because everyone else laughed. Then I went back to my apartment and felt annoyed with myself for laughing. I tried normal explanations first. Maybe my relative was awkward. Maybe I had connected two things that did not belong together. Maybe I was tired and being touchy. I wanted the harmless version to be true because it meant I did not have to start a building argument over something that sounded stupid out loud. The problem was the family version of events. Every time I tried to explain it away, that detail sat there like a thumbtack on the floor. Small but somehow always exactly where I wanted to step. By the end of that week, I was not asking whether I was annoyed for no reason. I was asking why the ordinary explanation needed me to skip so many details. It was not one huge thing at first. One day there was a timing issue. Another day there was a comment that sounded a little too prepared. Then there was a silence in the group chat right where a normal answer should have been. My first mistake was trying to figure out everyone's motives. Did my relative mean it? Would people understand if I said something? Was I becoming that person who turns every irritation into a case file? I hated all of those questions, so I went smaller. So I started writing down what actually happened. Not to build a courtroom, and not because I wanted a dramatic ending. I wrote it down because memory gets slippery when other people are confident. The concrete details were the family version of events, and I kept them separate from what I merely felt. Plain things. Things that did not need me to sound wounded in order to matter. What annoyed me was how ordinary the notes looked. If someone had found them, they would not have seen a scandal. They would have seen a list of little mismatches which somehow made me feel more ridiculous. But that was why I kept them. Real life did not hand me one perfect clue. It gave me a bunch of boring ones and made me decide whether I was going to keep ignoring them. Then one exchange made the old explanation harder to keep. It was not loud. It was not even interesting, honestly. But it gave me a next step. Name the time, name the place, and stop arguing about whether I sounded upset. The next time it came up, I did not try to sound relaxed. I was tired of performing normal over something that was not normal. I asked one direct question. The wording changed depending on the conversation, but the point was simple. Explain this without making me ignore what happened before it. People did not like that question. It gave them less room to pat my shoulder and move on. My relative did not explode. That would have been easier. Instead, they acted disappointed. Disappointment is powerful because it invites you to apologize for asking. I almost did. I could feel the old reflex rising in me, the one that wanted to restore the mood even if restoring it meant betraying my own memory. The pressure became being expected to keep peace with a story that was not true. That was the part that wore me down, more than any single incident. The situation kept asking me to choose between being easy to be around and saying what had happened. That is when the private conflict became a family rule I had never agreed to. The problem stopped being an awkward situation and became a test of what everyone in the family circle was willing to keep pretending not to know. The actual moment was awkward and badly lit. Someone had brought grocery bags and left them by their chair. A phone kept buzzing on the table. I remember those things better than whatever brave line I thought I might say. I started with the part nobody could argue with. No speech. No dramatic printout out. Just the detail, the time, and the message that made the simplest version harder to keep. For a few seconds, nothing happened. That was the worst part. I looked at my relative, then at the table, then at a water ring someone had left on the wood. Nobody wanted to be first to say anything. Then people started checking the order of things instead of checking my face. Not completely. Real life is stingy like that. But enough changed that the old explanation had to drag too much behind it. I left the family room knowing the next few days would be messier than the conversation itself. I had imagined feeling final about it. Mostly I felt hungry and shaky and irritated that I had forgotten my keys on the table. The next week was weird. Some people acted like they had always known something was off. A few avoided me in the lobby. One person called it a misunderstanding, which made me want to put my head through the mailboxes. I changed in small, practical ways after that. I ask better questions now. I keep track of repeated weirdness without apologizing for noticing it. I do not mistake a calm voice for an honest one anymore. I did feel relieved. I also felt embarrassed, tired, and weirdly disappointed. Getting my version back did not make me feel powerful. It mostly made me realize how long I had been trying to be pleasant about something that was costing me sleep. Still, I am glad I did not keep shrinking the truth until it fit inside other people's patience. That is what I had been doing. I had been making it smaller so nobody had to rearrange themselves around it. The problem with doing that for too long is that eventually you become the smallest thing in your own life. Life afterward looked annoyingly normal. Groceries, messages, laundry, the same elevator noise. Some evenings I still wondered if I had made too much of it. Then I would remember the one detail that started all of it, and I would stop arguing with myself. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm and checked my phone before I even sat up. Nothing new had happened. That should have felt good, but it annoyed me because my whole body was already braced for another message about the family version of events. I put the phone face down, made coffee, and still picked it back up 2 minutes later. I answered one normal message in the family circle and deleted 3 extra sentences before I sent it. The first draft sounded defensive. The second sounded like I was trying too hard to be charming. The one I sent was boring on purpose. It had the time, the detail, and one question. I hated how much effort it took to sound simple. My relative replied with a little joke first. That was the move that kept working on everyone else. Make the strange part funny enough, and people stop asking about the part that is actually bothering you. I almost let it work on me too. I typed hate, erased it, and left the question there. One person messaged me privately after that and said they had noticed the same weirdness. They did not want to say it in the main chat. I understood, but I was irritated anyway. Private agreement is comforting for about 5 minutes. Then you realize you are still the only one willing to be awkward where everyone can see it. I started keeping the notes in the least dramatic place possible, the back of an old notebook I used for grocery lists. Milk, trash bags, laundry detergent, then 3 lines about the family version of events. It looked ridiculous on the page. That helped weirdly. Ridiculous things can still be real. There was one afternoon when I almost apologized just to make the day easier. I had the message open. I even wrote, maybe I misunderstood. Then I looked at the earlier messages again and felt my face get hot because I had not misunderstood. I was just tired. After that, I stopped explaining the whole situation to new people. I learned to give them one scene at a time. Here's what was said. Here's what happened next. Here's the part I cannot explain away. People reacted better to that because they did not have to decide whether I was right about everything. They only had to look at one thing. In the family room, I could tell who had already chosen the easiest side. They did not say much. They looked at their phones. They made the same small face people make when they want a conversation to end without having to take a position. I used to read that face as a warning to stop. This time, I kept going. I was not calm the whole time. My voice caught once. I lost my place once. I said the wrong date and corrected myself. That correction mattered to me because it was the kind of tiny mistake people sometimes use to dismiss the entire point. So I fixed it out loud and kept talking. My relative tried to pull the conversation toward my reaction again. They asked why I was making this so intense. They asked why I could not just let it go. I said I would love to let it go, but I needed a normal answer first. Nobody seemed to enjoy that sentence. What bothered me later was not just what happened. It was how many people waited to see whether I could carry the whole thing by myself. Once the answer became obvious, a few of them found their voices. Before that, they let me be the uncomfortable one. I went home after one of those conversations and burned a frozen pizza because I kept checking my phone. That is the kind of detail that stays with me. Not some grand moment. Just me standing in the kitchen with a blackened edge of cheese, furious at myself for letting the family circle follow me home. A few days later, I ran into my relative in passing and they acted almost normal. That was harder than open hostility. Open hostility would have made me feel sane. Normal forced me to wonder whether I was the only person still carrying the previous week around like a hot pan. So I made myself do something unrelated every night. One night I cleaned the cabinet under the sink. One night I called my cousin and talked about her job for 40 minutes. One night I watched half a movie and understood none of it. It was not healing. It was just refusing to give the situation every hour I had. A few weeks later, I found a note I had written during the worst part of it. It was only 3 lines. I had written the family version of events at the top, then underlined it so hard the pen almost tore the paper. Under that I had written, "Stop making this easier for everyone else than it is for you." I kept that note in my wallet for a while, not because it was wise or dramatic, but because I needed confirmation that I had seen the shape of it before anyone else would admit it was there. When people are confident around you, your own memory starts to feel rude. That little note reminded me that my memory had not been rude. It had been early. I wish I had a cleaner ending, but I do not. Some people moved on too easily. Some people learned the wrong amount. Some people still act like the whole thing was one awkward misunderstanding. I let them. I know the difference between a misunderstanding and a pattern that kept asking me to disappear.
For more Reddit-style drama stories, subscribe to Voice It. If you want another one now, choose a story on screen.